So, very, very last learning unit, and it is an interesting one in the sense that it pulls together everything from the beginning of the year till now. And what it also does, it takes us to that next step, which is implementation. Now, obviously, a strategic plan is just a document, and what we have done thus far is really just look at a document. It's something that is printed, is something that you have some sort of a meeting for, you disappear into some quiet room, you write your vision, your mission, and you do all the other bits and pieces to create your strategic plan. The only time you ever benefit from your strategic plan is when you actually implement this. What this system and this process that we're looking at does, the organizational architecture, it gives us a blueprint in terms of what the organization must look like in order to give life to your strategic plan. So it gives us the building blocks of the ideal organization. Now, the one rule about this blueprint is that it's not one size fits all. Every organization has its own unique architecture, their own unique blueprint in terms of giving life to their strategic plans. You can have a look at the objectives. I've given a couple of pieces there. So when we look at the supposed organizational architecture, the first one is the idea that it is a formal document. So again, every organization looks at what they want to achieve in terms of their strategic plan. They look at their vision and all the objectives. They also get a sense of what the realities of the ever-evolving environment are, and then they create this document. And this document, as I said, specifies those building blocks that need to be in place in order to give life to your strategic plan. The second part is that this document has to link to your strategic drivers. So those strategic drivers essentially are things that need to be in place in order to be successful. So every one of those drivers has some sort of component inside the strategic plan, but it is really a sense of what we do well, and also what we do to create magic in terms of our customers. And then when we look at the organizational architecture, as I said, it's something unique to the organization. And also, it is not something that is set up by some senior management team, as often happens with a strategic plan. This is created by everyone involved in giving life to your strategic plan. This is created by consulting, talking to every single constituency that has a stake in this process. So when we talk about what an organizational architecture is, the first one, it's this idea of how we do business. So we spoke about earlier the idea that businesses are so unique that the reality of the environment is so harsh for most businesses that you need to have some solid set of guidelines, some sort of mental model in terms of dealing with that crazy environment. Your organizational architecture is a mental model of what the ideal organization looks like. You can see this one defines it a little bit more in detail: system structures, procedures, technologies. Again, every single part, every building block in giving life to your strategic plan. And others there, guys, again, the mention of that blueprint, but it is about rules and procedures and policies and guidelines and the structure and the ideal culture that we create in an organization. And once you've got this blueprint in place, this is then shared with the wider organization, where people can find a little place for themselves in the organization, part of the blueprint, how they are going to help give life to this document. The important thing in terms of reading the the architecture is that it reads from right to left. I don't know if you guys will pick up the cursor, but right to left. So it starts with our original definition in terms of modern strategic success. We spoke about it as wealth creation for stakeholders. That definition is as relevant now as it will be in a good few years. The idea of being the most profitable organization in the industry belongs to the resource-based view, belongs to the 2000s and before that. This starts with those key stakeholders. This starts with who we are creating wealth for, and will refer to everyone from our shareholders right through to the communities that we operate in. We'll talk to each of these sub-elements, each of these building blocks. And remember, ideally, you want all of those to contribute to wealth creation. And if we think of strategic success, wealth creation, every single one of these building blocks has to add a little bit in terms of creating wealth. Right. So we start with our stakeholders. Nothing dramatic here, guys. If you don't know who stakeholders are at this stage, I think we're in serious, serious trouble. For me, a stakeholder is anyone who is impacted or impacts the organization. They have an interest in the organization. They have some sort of vested interest in an organization in terms of either benefiting from it, contributing from it, or a combination of the two. So when we talk about our stakeholders, we talk about primary, those directly affected, and those that are less directly affected. So this is an NB. They love asking this. In my mind, this is a Poncella question. If they ask you this question, you should get full marks. Generally, they ask the question along the lines of give you the organization in the scenario, in the case study, and then they would say to you, find the key stakeholders in this organization, and you're expected to do this. So they've given an example here of introducing a total quality management system. That could be anything, guys. That could be a product launch. That could be a change in organizational culture. It could be a rebranding exercise. It really doesn't matter. What is important is the recognition that every one of these stakeholders will be impacted. So, in terms of our shareholders, whatever we do from a shareholder perspective, the focus is always about making sure that we reward them for their interest. Shareholders put money into your organization, they invest capital, and there is a belief that they need to benefit from it. Employees also will have an impact in terms of their knowledge, skills, their abilities, their talents, and contributing to the organization. But they will also receive salaries in return and benefits and decent working conditions. In terms of customers, and we know that without customers, you don't survive. So the essence of this is addressing customer needs through whatever new processes we want to implement. Our suppliers have now, in terms of these modern definitions, become part of a strategic long-term relationship, in particular when you outsource all your non-core business issues, in particular when businesses focus on their core businesses. And if we think, for example, of Volkswagen is simply an assembler. The actual manufacturing happens at different suppliers, and it's part of that value chain, part of that supply chain. And the key thing is that most modern organizations are assemblers. They Lego block the last bit of the product together after receiving components and sub-assemblies and parts from their suppliers. Guys, and then the community at large, it really is about positively impacting the community in terms of corporate social responsibility. There is this recognition that organizations are incredibly wealthy, and the people who've made the organizations wealthy are the communities, and therefore we need to give back as organizations. So when we look at capabilities, I think we spoke at the beginning of here about the difference between a resource and a capability. A resource, obviously, our people, our raw materials, etc., that we have in the organization. Capabilities allow us to maximize what we can get out of our resources. So, Google, for example, its capabilities include the fantastic culture that they have. It includes their fantastic algorithm. It is the way they set up their organization, the way their teams interact, the way those teams add value. So resources are things we own. Capabilities maximize what we can get out of those resources. And key in terms of that, every single moment we use those capabilities, it's about wealth creation. And yeah, in terms of those capabilities, every single one of these elements that we'll discuss in the actual organizational architecture has to be aligned with the organization's strategy. So whether it's culture supporting strategy, structure supporting strategy, your capabilities need to support your strategy. If there is a change in strategy, you need to update your capabilities. You'll remember, guys, we spoke about dynamic capabilities at the beginning of the year, the ability to reinvent yourself. And those dynamic capabilities allow you to align your capabilities with your strategies. And then processes. Processes are those systems, those procedures, are those bits that we have in the organization that combine to create value. And again, wealth creation for stakeholders. So these processes have to align to your strategy so that we can make wealth creation a reality. In terms of those management processes, the planning, organizing, leading, controlling. But I think often it also has to do with work methods in terms of how do we manufacture? Is it a traditional production line? Is it a moving production line? How do we deal with elements within the production line? Do we move the products through the production line, or do we move the entire team with the product through the production line? Those work methods are important. Every single procedure essentially is supported by a work method in an organization. The roles that people are assigned, the one thing we've seen in terms of the evolution of organizations in particular, because the environment has become so volatile, is job descriptions now are set aside. The idea that you can encapsulate and capture what a person does on a continuous basis in a job description is naive. It really is naive. Job descriptions belong to the 1990s and before. They designed for slow moving environments, slow moving organizations, and the truth is most people who still have job descriptions will find that those job descriptions are outdated. And yes, they play an important role in salary systems, etc., but that's not the point. Modern organizations assign roles. They give you broad roles. Those roles essentially have to do with creating value. Often modern organizations don't particularly care how you fulfill that role. It is what you achieve as a consequence of that role. And then your work agenda, those of you that have management by objectives in your organization, is essentially what a work agenda is. And this work agenda will tell us what goals we need to achieve in order to be successful in our job. And then also we decide the tasks that form part of those goals. And then what do we need from an employee? Most of you will talk about employee specifications or job specifications in this definition, but it tells us what competencies require, but also what the performance levels we require. And those form part of performance management processes, etc. And then here, operational processes. This is the production line. This is how we create value. This is how we get products and services out the door. In terms of those operational processes, it would be the stuff found on a traditional production line, on those systems and procedures that form part of your production line. And then your support processes. Now, your support processes will always be HR, who's there to attract, retain, develop, and motivate. Marketing, who is there to create needs and to fulfill those needs in terms of giving feedback to the production team and R&D so that we can build products to impress customers, and information systems as well. Guys, and then just, I think what an organization structure does, it allows us to use our skills, our abilities in an organization. These systems, these structures show us who reports to who within the broader organizational context. What is important in terms of those is that within your structure, you'll have elements in your jobs that would indicate the expected knowledge, the expected skills, the expected competencies that we want from individuals, as well as attitudes or the orientation with which you approach your job. In terms of a structure, it is the formal pattern of how people link together in an organization. Yeah, so when we look at the evolution of structures and where we were and where we'll be going in the future, if we're not there yet, hopefully very soon, for people who work in these structures. If we again look at this model, we'll work back to front in terms of right to left. Strategic outcomes, what structures should do. Products, productivity, services, and issues around the idea of efficiency and effectiveness and making sure that we create magic for customers. In terms of the structures, these are the traditional elements that define what a structure will look like. Your division of labor, if we think of how we divide marketing from finance, from operations, from HR, from supply chain, from public relations, I don't know which ones I've left out. And then from a departmentalization perspective, the idea of how we link those people together in departments. Span of control would have to do with a number of people who report to a manager. In traditional organizations, you have these tall, skinny organizations where you have large numbers of reporting levels and you have lots of managers, and each of those managers would have few employees reporting to them. The modern one, the wide span of control, when we have a wide span of control, we have fewer managers, you have a flatter organizational structure, and you will have many people reporting to each of those managers. And then authority, really about where the decisions get taken. In terms of traditional organizations, it's a park your brains at the door. You would need them here to employees because managers take decisions. Managers will give us what we have to do. So you're not here to think, you're here to do. Again, a very traditional view of what an organization should be. Decentralized is where decisions are taken where they happen. So here we empower employees, we give employees the authority to take decisions about their lives at work, and they then are able to move things through, provide information to managers, take decisions at a moment's notice, not having to wait for some senior superior authority to give them permission. Those two divide into those two elements. The Newtonian paradigm, the old style for traditional organizations for slow-moving environments, and the chaotic paradigm. Now, the magic with the chaotic term is that it's chaos that is organized. So organized chaos. And what it means is that These structures allow for flexibility. They allow organizations to be light on their feet. They allow organizations to adjust very, very rapidly, to bob and weave, talk boxing, to bob and weave in line with the external environment. And then you can see the first two elements there. I'm not going to worry too much about it. We've done enough on that. Your pestle and industry scan, and then the role that visions play. And as I said, everything has to be aligned to your strategy. So let's look at each of these. So from an organizational structure perspective, I think most of you would have learned this in first year. Structure follows strategy. Another way to look at that is that structure enables strategy. So without having a clear sense of your strategic plan, it's very difficult to create that structure. For me, structure is the vehicle that will allow us to achieve our strategy. To use a silly example, if you want to win the World Rally Championship, that car, that structure, that vehicle would be very, very different from winning the World Formula One Championship. Formula One cars are flat and they stick around corners. You can't put a Formula One car in a rally. It wouldn't work because it is a vehicle that's inappropriate. So structure has to follow strategy. You have to have the right vehicle. So in terms of modern demands for flexibility, I think we know that we have broad labor specialization, which means, yeah, so we don't have individuals who are traditional specialists in marketing and finance, etc. We have versatilists who can transition across your functional areas, who can seamlessly move from marketing to finance to HR, between strategic and operational issues. Wide spans of control, as I said, so few managers, lots of employees, and then decisions getting taken where they matter at the lowest level in the organization.